Welcome, everyone, to the Asian Voices radio podcast, where you'll find real Asian American conversations about all things, including the topics you were too afraid to ask your Asian parents. I'm your host, Linda Schwartz, and today's guest is Jack Toan, a community leader and a corporate philanthropist. He is currently the Chief Operating Officer at Illumination Foundation, and previously, Jack was the Vice President and Community Affairs Manager for Wells Fargo Community Relations, responsible for managing the Wells Fargo Foundation's charitable giving and volunteerism programs in Southern California. He serves on the board of various nonprofit organizations such as the Union of Pan-Asian Communities, Team Kids, and Asian American Futures. He is the founder and program consultant for Children's Defense and Safety Awareness Program in partnership with the St. Anselm's Cross-Cultural Community Center. Welcome, Jack.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Oh, it's so good to have you. So let's get right into it. Can you share a little bit about your story and how you got to where you are?
Sure. It's a bit of a long story, but I'll start with me coming to the U.S. as a refugee, and my family and I escaped from Vietnam in 1978. My parents woke me up in the middle of the night and took us under the cover of darkness onto a boat. And we left and sailed out and ended up in a refugee camp in Hong Kong. And from there, we were applying for asylum in various countries. And of course, the U.S. certainly was one of those. And unbeknownst to us, at the same time, there was a small church in South Carolina, in a small town there called Bethel Presbyterian Church. The pastor there saw the plight of these boat people, and he went to his congregation of 68 people and said, we need to do something. And so they sponsored my family to the U.S. And that's how we came. In 1979, we arrived in the U.S. in this little town in South Carolina.
Wow.
That's where I grew up.
That's interesting because my family, my mom left Laos and also under the guise of darkness and left on a boat to Thailand, to a refugee camp there. And in 1979 was sponsored by a family from a Catholic church in Savannah, Georgia. So
Wow, we weren't too far from each other then.
yeah, we weren't too far from each other. But I was their first American born, so I've been deemed the lucky one in the family. So so share a little bit more about what happened after that.
Yes, I'm sure, like you, I grew up as American and apple pie as could be from the South, and eventually, my parents, as our family came to the U.S., they were all over the place, right? And many of them ended up in Southern California. So my parents wanted to be closer to family, and in 1987, we packed up and moved to California. And I ended up in Orange County, and finished high school here, and went to college at UC Irvine, and then from there, that's kind of where I learned a lot of about community service and giving back, and just were able to reflect on my life and wanted to do something that actually made a difference for other people.
So, is there a specific story that you could share with us about a time when you saw that kind of community support from your childhood that resonated with you and had kind of stuck with you all these years?
You know, it wasn't just one particular event, right? And a lot of times you have these moments where some people just, that was the catalyst. For me, it was about consistency, right? It's
Mm.
how people can love others consistently, and how they can day after day serve those that are not like them. And honestly, I didn't really appreciate that until I was older and looked back on it. And this, if you think about the small town, this community, uh, my family and obviously stood out like a sore thumb. There was nobody
Mhm.
like us around, uh, but people despite what the stereotype might be today about the South, I mean, people were loving and accepting of us. Maybe not in the way that we would like to be, but the people that took care of us, they came around us, they gave us everything. We came with nothing, and we had a shelter, we had washing machines, we had clothes, we had everything, and had volunteers work with us over the summer to help us with our English. We had friends who drove us to my brother to piano lessons, and for me to go to art lessons. Um,
Wow.
living in the South in the rural area is just it's not like around the corner, so
No,
it's a
it's
bit of
not
a drive,
easy.
right? Uh,
Yeah.
so uh,
When they say it's the country, they mean it is deep in the country.
that's right, that's right, and that's not to say everything was perfect. And you certainly
Yeah.
face racism, feeling being different. Actually, the congregation patrolled our house for the first week we were there because there were elements within that community that didn't want us there.
Wow. So when you guys got to California, your parents decided that they would raise you as Chinese rather than Vietnamese. Is that correct?
Actually, when we arrived, in the South, there was a lot of GIs who had returned from the Vietnam War, and
Got
my
it.
parents
Okay.
identified. We were Chinese Vietnamese, so
Hmm.
I spoke both languages, but they didn't see a future for the Vietnamese language necessarily, and thought that it'd be more useful to retain the Chinese language, um, and also didn't want me to face the prejudice or racism from people who were against the war, and and cause additional problems because of the association with Vietnam. And so I identified more originally when I first came as Chinese, and then when I came to California, that was sort of a different type of experience, right? Because Southern California,
Yeah.
there's so many different people, and there's a large Vietnamese community here in Southern California. So it felt like easier to feel like I belong somewhere.
Yeah. That's so interesting. And I totally, totally get that sense of community support. My family ended up, well, my mom, after my parents got divorced, ended up coming to Santa Rosa, California, which is in Northern California, and there was a bigger Lao community there. And I like you, I didn't appreciate that community support and that sense of community until I got older. And I kind of shied away from the Lao people in Northern California. And, and now looking back on that, I kind of regret that because I don't have a sense of community now in terms of being part of or belonging to a Lao community. So that's something that I think about a lot. But I'm so glad to hear that you remember that and you have really taken that feeling and of community support and have expanded that. So can you tell us a little bit about how you came to be a part of the Illumination Foundation and all of the philanthropy work that you're involved with?
Sure. Well, my career, my longest career run was really with Wells Fargo, and I worked at Wells Fargo for past 18 years in community development and philanthropy, and we were able to, with the company's support, able to really do a lot in the community in terms of serving and not only small business, but areas of affordable housing, community revitalization, and really that's where I got involved in a lot of different things. And while I was at Wells Fargo, I learned about this organization called the Elimination Foundation, and they were just starting up about 15 years ago. And yeah, I went to the UCI Mirage School of Business, and this group that started the Elimination Foundation started it as a project out of the school. And so I got curious and said, I wonder what this project's all about. At that time, that was when the housing bubble had burst, and
Mhm.
all the subprime issues, kind of came to a head, and a lot of people were losing their homes, and homelessness started climbing up. And so this organization I saw was doing something that's really innovative in addressing a lot of those issues, and were able to, you be flexible at the time to navigate through the changing ebb and flows of homelessness. And they were doing, because of the innovation, I was really attracted to it. So I started supporting them, and they invited me to join the board. And I actually originally said no, and I took my wife to one of their fundraising events, and she said, "Hey, you have to join this board and be more involved." And it was through that conversation I learned that, as a, a younger child, her and her mom was evicted from their apartment in LA because her dad was deported, and she ended up on the street. And it really made a connection with her. And as she reminded me, hey, weren't you also a refugee, and you were considered homeless, right? And all these people
Mm-hmm.
helped you, and so you need to be involved and help this organization. So I joined the board, and that's how I got connected to it. And 13 years later, there's an opportunity for me to be directly involved as a COO for the organization now. And so 6 months ago, I left Wells Fargo to come join the Elimination Foundation to really get my hands
Wow.
directly into trying to solve this homeless problem.
Wow. And can you share the mission of Illumination Foundation?
Yeah, the mission is to disrupt the cycle of homelessness, and so
Great.
yeah, it's uh, and the reason we say disrupt is, homelessness will always be here, right? And there'll be different
Mm-hmm.
reasons for it. But how do we play a role in providing as comprehensive of a program as possible to really break that cycle and end that cycle? And in order to disrupt that cycle, we also have to work with children who uh, we're seeing a large number of children that are homeless. And so we want to break that cycle so that it doesn't continue.
Yeah. So, can you share a little bit about how these children become in the situation?
Yeah, yeah, sure. Homelessness. I think when you say homeless, the stereotype and what most people think about is are the people that are, chronically
Hmm.
homeless on Skid Row, right? They're dirty, or they look in a certain way, and you have that image. But the reality of it, homelessness is a really wide spectrum, and we have individuals who are homeless that are working. We have individuals who are at risk of homelessness, meaning they could be living in a one bedroom apartment, you know, maybe
Hmm.
3 or 4 families in one bed. And so they're very unstably housed. There are those that just have health conditions and were not able to make rent, and through circumstances ended up on the street. So there's a lot of reasons why there's homeless. There's certainly drugs, and there's certainly mental health issues as well. And so it's a lot of different issues to address. We can't stereotype what
Hmm.
homelessness is. We have to look at the individual as a person, and a lot of times we dehumanize people, and we don't look at them. We look at them as an image, whatever image we have. But really, you have to
Yeah.
learn about their situation, understand what it is that got them into the position they're in. And then that's when you can really bring those services to the forefront that can help them in that specific situation. It's not a one size fits all, but it's really a customized approach to serving
Got
the
it.
individual or the family. We actually have a growing population of
Mm.
older women and single women with children that are ended up on the streets.
And can you share a little bit about the services that you guys offer these people when they come through and how they get do you guys do like an outreach program, or do they come to you? How do they find you? Or
Yeah,
how do you find them?
yeah, so we do have outreach. We do that, but we are in participate in the coordinated entry system as well. Meaning we take referrals from different entry points that the county has set up.
Got it.
So it could be the
Okay.
police, picking someone up and bringing them to our shelter, or a referral partner. Um, and our core competency when it's founded was in housing and healthcare. And so
Mhm.
Paul Leon, who founded the organization, he was a public health nurse, and so he had this health background, and he was seeing a lot of people on the streets for their health conditions, and uh, it you can't really recover well when you're on the street, right? If you have a health
Hmm.
condition, it exacerbates the problem even worse. Um, and so their core competency was to provide that health care. But what they found was that if you can't stabilize the individual with housing, it's hard to provide them that medical care. And so that's became their core competency. And along the way, they built this program that was a continuum of care. So from you can take someone from street all the way to permanent housing. And so we have the transitional housing and all the services around it. And we wrap all that with services like case management, housing navigation, substance abuse counseling, mental
Yeah.
health counseling, and all the medical pieces that they
It
need
sounds
as
like a
well.
very well-rounded thing of services. Like it's very robust
Yeah, it is,
that you
and
guys offer.
that was the innovation. I think that I really was attracted to is we're really addressing the whole care
Yeah.
of individuals. Because I don't know
Holistic
if you ever
care.
heard of the
Yeah.
term called social determinants of health, right? So you have these social determinants that if you one of them fail, it puts you more at risk. So if you don't have a job, if
Right.
you don't have access to food, you don't have access to healthcare, and so on. So these social determinants, if you can address those social determinants of health, it's more likely to reduce the risk for an individual and help them in the recovery.
Got it.
So we approach it from that perspective, and a lot of organizations might focus on one or two of these items. We try to focus on all of it because
Nice.
you need to do that in order to help somebody get back on their feet.
Yeah, it sounds like you guys have a very holistic approach to serving these people. And how many people do you guys serve on a monthly basis?
That's a good question. It kind of varies, but based on the month, right? So uh, for example, in the winter we're going to see more people because it's
Right.
harder to be
Yeah,
outside.
of course.
But I will tell you that during the COVID period, on top of our uh, regular programming, we actually was in Orange County was the uh, provider for the county to help individuals who are experiencing homelessness if they got COVID or were in
Hmm.
contact with someone with COVID. So we
Mm,
operated the COVID site, and just that program alone, we served 2,700 individuals through
wow,
2020, just to
that's
keep them
incredible.
safe. And I want to mention that because our staff were essentially frontline staff, the case management, the nursing staff that were there to take care of all these individuals. They're amazing
Wow.
people.
That's so wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. So, I know that you have a really big heart for children, and I heard that you're also an accomplished martial artist and that you founded a children's self defense and safety awareness program. Can you tell us a little bit about that and why this is so important to you?
Sure. The program I started in 1999, and I partnered up with an organization called the Orange County Asian Pacific Islander Community Alliance, or CAPICA for short. But they helped me put the infrastructure in place so that I could focus on teaching with the kids. And for me, it was really important to focus on kids because they're going to be our future leaders and the future physicians and scientists and uh, future change makers. And if you can instill a sense of uh, uh, service, a sense of all the values that we care about, integrity, honor, uh,
Hmm.
then that is how we create change in the world, right? Because if you can impact them at a young age, it will influence the way
Hmm.
they think and behave. And so I use martial arts as a means to develop those leaders and to help them have the tools to be successful in what they do. And I did that for years. And let me share a story of, I trained in martial arts when I was in college, and we had a week that uh, essentially kind of like Hell Week for fraternity, and so we were
Mm.
similar to a fraternity in that sense, and we put everyone through really strenuous exercise, and you think, okay, we're done with the class, but at the end, the instructor said, "Hey, everybody sit into make three circles, sit together in a circle, link arms, link your ankles, and I want you all to together. Uh, everybody has to finish, or nobody goes home. 200 sit-ups, just to wrap up the night." And so we link arms and we hold, and then we start, and uh, 10 no problem, 15 no problem, and keep in mind, we have all kind of people in the class. Some are more athletic, some are less, and men and women, and so on. So you know the ones who were stronger, it became really hard for them because the person next to them may not be as strong, right? And so they find that
Hmm.
uh, that
You're only as strong as your weakest
that's right.
link.
That's exactly right. And that's what we learned. That's what I learned. And what it taught me was that if I'm strong in something, or if I have a gift in something, I need to use that to lift the person up next to me.
Yes.
All right. And so that way we can all finish together. It's not about me winning or the other person winning.
That's so inspiring. That is so inspiring. Um, and there's a couple of other things that um, you wanted to talk about today, but one thing that one thing that I'm getting, because you serve on the board of so many organizations and you're so involved with children. Can you share a little bit about what is at the heart of all of these organizations that you serve? Are they all similar in some way?
No, I get involved in a lot of different things, and you know, kids. I still teach martial arts. I teach for
Mm,
my wife's program now. She runs an outreach program out of our church and focus on the
nice.
community in Santa Ana, and so I teach a martial arts class there. So I still do that, and I still believe in that. But yeah, I've been becoming more involved. Yeah, I'm also involved in the UCI Alumni Association because I believe higher education is also important for change, right?
Yes.
But I think if you ask me what the common thread is, it is about change. It
Hmm.
is about uh,
Yes.
building leaders who will create change. And in the same way, I've helped co-founded and on the board of an organization called Asian American Futures, and we have some great co-founders who are involved in philanthropy and also community development work. And we started this before 2020. We launched it under a different name called the National Asian American Community Foundation. We were able to raise a bit of money from that, and then uh, and then COVID hits and the pandemic hits, and then we see these social issues pop up and the racism against our
Mm,
community, and
mhm.
uh, the you were born here. I wasn't, but we both grew up here at a very young age, and I think you and I
Mhm.
probably feel as American as anyone else. And we know
Mhm.
American history as well as anyone else, but because of the way we look, for some people, we will never belong, right? And
Oh, yeah,
and
yeah.
so over my years of doing philanthropy, what I learned is that if you look at philanthropy as a whole, less than 1% of all philanthropic dollar goes to serve the Asian American community. What
Wow.
is that reason? I don't know what all the reasons are, but there's certainly the model minority myth plays a huge part in that,
I was just thinking
right?
that,
It
yeah.
is, they don't need support. They don't need
Mhm.
the help because they're all
Mhm.
doctors and lawyers, and the reality is, if you disaggregate the data of the Asian American community, you'll see that there's a huge amount of needs, and people also don't understand the cultural nuances that defines the needs. So, for example, and I'm just preaching to the choir here, is mental health. In our
Mhm.
culture, mental health you don't talk about. If you don't talk about it, you're not going to report it. And so if you're not going to report it, the number is like zero, right? And
Yeah,
so when
yeah.
they look at the data and say, oh, there's no mental health issues within the Asian American community, so we don't need to allocate any resources to support them. And
Right.
so, this organization is trying to change the approach to philanthropy and to also highlight the Asian American Pacific Islander serving organizations that are doing the work in the community and not getting any love and any visibility. And so we want to provide that platform for that, but we also want to provide them with resources to help them activate and build capacity, and also to bring in educate mainstream funders to be able to say, oh, now I
Yeah,
understand.
we need help
Yeah,
too.
absolutely. Right.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that's
Oh,
what the
wow.
organization is attempting to do, and we're actually in the process of reviewing a bunch of applications through our Gold Futures Challenge in partnership with Gold House. And we've received over 160 applications, completed
That's
applications
amazing.
across the U.S. From Asian Pacific Islander organizations seeking support. And then in October, we'll actually open it up to the community to vote on. And so the community also have an
Sweet.
opportunity to have a voice in this whole process.
That's pretty incredible. So, I heard from a bird that there was a really interesting story about how you got into Wells Fargo. Can you share that story with us?
Sure. So uh, after I went to business school, that was when the .com was really happening, and everybody was getting the big six-figure sign-on bonus, and uh, that's what every MBA student was dreaming of at the time. And so when I graduated, the .com bubble burst, and there was really no jobs available. And I was thinking, what are some traditional things that I'd like to do? And of course, I was focused on marketing. I enjoyed marketing, and had focused on that in business school. Um, and at that time, I had already developed the youth program with Okapica to teach self defense and safety awareness for kids in the API community, and had that program had grown tremendously, and so it was sort of a highlight for the organization. And at that time, as I was looking for work, one of the board member was the community development manager at Wells Fargo, and at the time, Wells Fargo was expanding, and he was becoming the guy that was covering Orange County, and he was forming a team. And it was through my community service and community work that I ended up having this connection, got the interview, and he hired me uh, to Wells Fargo, and that's how I got into the company. It was honestly, I was really wasn't looking to go down that path. It wasn't, I didn't even know that you could get paid to do community work. I was doing it for free, and I kind of fell into it. But it was, I maybe it was meant to be, and that was a path that was presented to me inadvertently, and it worked out really wonderfully.
Yeah, it sounds very serendipitous to me. And, sometimes I say that the things that we want in life, they choose us, or maybe the things that we want that we don't know that we want chooses us first, and then we figure out, oh, this is what I want.
Yeah, that's right.
Very cool. Thank you.
And really, the reality of it is, I ended up doing marketing. It was a different form of marketing. So I got into corporate social responsibility very early on, and I was able to develop an expertise in it early, uh, which allowed me to do all the things I was able to do after.
Very cool. You're such an inspiring man, Jack. I'm honored
Thank you.
to know you and get to know you right now. I'm just so inspired by all the things that you shared today, by the way.
Thank you. Well, I think we all have stories that will help, and maybe that's part of this radio program, right?
Definitely.
Isn't that what it's all about?
Definitely. Well, I think we're coming up to the top of our time together. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with us before we go?
Um, well, you asked me what the common thread is
Yeah,
across the things that I do, and I think it's, all of us have the ability to make a difference and make an impact, and it's whatever the issues are that you're um, as passion that you have a passion for. I would encourage you to really kind of activate and be a part of it. And so, it takes you, it takes me, it takes every one of us to link arms and pull each other up, and
definitely.
whether it's homelessness or Asian Pacific Islander American issues.
That's wonderful. Well, I'm here to link arms with you, and I'm so excited to learn more about these organizations. So we're going to wrap it up. So to learn more about Jack Toan and his organizations, Illumination Foundation and Asian American Futures, please visit asianamericanfutures.org and ifhomeless.org. And if you have any suggestions for future topics, we'd love to hear from you. And also be sure to subscribe as well as follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Until next week, I am Linda Schwartz. Thank you for listening. And please join us next week for another exciting and thought-provoking Asian Voices radio show. Until then, take care, everybody.